The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. What's going on, everybody? It's Wednesday. It's Fantasy NBA Today. It's a Hoop Ball presentation, and I am your host, Dan Besbris. August 11th. Can we start the countdown yet? Well, I think the answer is probably yes, if I could remember exactly which Tuesday on October. I think it's the 19th. 2 months, 8 days? Is that where we're at right now? Of course, it's the 2 long months. That's actually not true. That's wrong. That's July, August. Hey, guys. It's a 31 and a 30. 61 plus 8 is 69 days. Hey, that's a perfect time to start a countdown, isn't it? August 11th, 2021. We start the countdown towards opening day 2021. But really, we're on countdown watch to draft season 2021. And that, in my estimation, is like next week. That's incredible. We're part of the way through the Eastern Conference. Actually, we're most of the way through the Eastern Conference. A couple more teams to go in the Atlantic Division. We may have to do a little bit of a redux on some of the teams out west that got impacted in a large way by either free agency or injury or some combination thereof. But just a few more teams to go. We've got Philadelphia left on the docket. We've got Boston left on the docket. And sheesh, is that it? That can't be right. I'm miscounting somewhere in there. What am I missing? Toronto. Sorry, Canada. Sorry. That's a dumb one to miss because that's actually going to be a really fun spot to handicap. We will save Toronto for Friday, which I know it's not like the buzz team that's going to get all the accidental clicks on a podcast. That's New York. That's Brooklyn. That's LA. That's Boston. But Toronto, to me, is really interesting. Today, we're going to do a team that's a little bit less interesting, and I'm okay with saying that. It's the Philadelphia 76ers. Before we dive into the Sixers, I want to remind everybody you can follow me on Twitter at Dan Besbris. If you can spell it, you can follow me. That's the old adage for anyone with the last name Besbris. If you can spell it, you can find me. Besbris. 7 letters. The R is in the second half. Happens a lot. Get a lot of Besbris. Which I get it. Rolls off the tongue a little bit better, really, than my actual last name. Besbris. I get called a lot of things that are usually nicknames, so folks don't have to deal with the last name. You can follow Hoopball on Twitter at HoopballFantasy. HOOPBALL, the word fantasy. That's all one word on Twitter. That's the handle. Good stuff coming out on that feed every day. The Hoopball Loyalty Program. I actually personally wrote up a massive tweet thread on the Hoopball Loyalty Program that went out from at Hoopball Fantasy last night. I want to remind you guys that you now have 5 days left. If you're already on a Hoopball premium membership, just leave it on. Just leave it on. If you're not on one and you're one of 2 groups of people, you're either in Group A. Well, Group A was you already have a premium membership. Group B is you had one and you canceled it when last season ended. Group C is you're thinking about getting one or may get one in the future at some point. There's also a Group D, which is I'll never get anything, and I'm not talking to you. For Group A, just leave it alone. You're automatically enrolled in the Hoopball Loyalty Program. For Groups B and C, you have 5 days to get on a premium membership and lock in last year's prices forever. You heard me. It's not lock in last year's prices for this coming year. It's lock in last year's prices forever. And to get it and keep it, all you have to do is be on a premium membership before prices go up in 5 days and don't turn it off. If you turn it off, when you sign back up, it'll be at whatever the price is when you sign back up. If you leave it on forever, or until you're done playing fantasy in 25 years, or whatever that happens to be, you will never see your price go up as long as you leave it on. That's the Hoopball Loyalty Program. Go to hoop-ball.com, click on the Premium tab, and go get yourself on a membership today, unless you're already on one, in which case, just chill. So the 76ers are a loaded question in fantasy handicapping because they went 49-23 this last year. Everything seemed to be going according to plan until the playoffs came around. And if you can't shoot, you can't win in the playoffs. Unfortunately, that's the way it is right now. Giannis disproved that because he is so incredible at everything besides shooting that he was able to cover up that fact. Giannis has, to say if you can't shoot, you can't play in the playoffs is a little bit of an oversimplification because there are a couple guys out there who can't shoot but are still incredible offensive talents. The guy I'm talking about, of course, by rolling that phrase in together was, honestly, before the finals this year, was kind of Giannis too, but it's basically Ben Simmons. If you can't shoot, you're going to have trouble winning in the playoffs because teams will pack the paint. Teams will game plan for your weaknesses. And if you have a glaring one, like I can't get a point on the board unless I'm laying it up, you're in real trouble. There are a lot of ways to guard someone like that. Russell Westbrook is sort of a smaller iteration of that same problem, but at least he can hit a short-range jumper. He can hit the mid-range shot. It's not a highly efficient thing, but it's better than watching Ben Simmons throw a left-handed frozen rope from anywhere outside the painted area, and even some places inside of it. Like, if you're straight away going towards the free throw line. Shoot a free throw better, buddy. And this got exposed. And Milwaukee was able to get around some of their exposures on the Giannis offensive front by putting Giannis in the pick and roll as the roll man. It forced his defender to come up to guard the guy with the basketball. Problem is, if the defender comes up, Giannis can beat anyone to almost any spot. Ben Simmons can't do that. Russ can kind of do that. Russ is fast enough and smaller. We've seen him actually get past defenses on his own, even in the playoffs sometimes. There are very easy ways to deal with him, and the Lakers are going to have to figure that stuff out. But this is a needlessly long conversation about how Ben Simmons has no offensive game other than laying it up and in. And that's a really big problem. And now Kendrick Perkins comes out, says he's not taking calls from the 76ers brass. I don't know if he's offended because Joel Embiid kind of called him out after one of their playoff games. I was like, look, we had a layup and instead we missed 2 free throws and the game just wasn't there. The game just wasn't the same from that point forward. If I'm Joel Embiid, I'm a little bit frustrated too because all of the things we've heard, and I don't know any of these things to be true, but we read the tea leaves in NBA media circles. If you're not inside the locker room, you have to read between the lines. And between the lines, I don't know who's planting these stories, because every story is someone's trying to accomplish something. My wife and I are catching up on Succession right now, and they talk a little bit in each season, because the main characters in that show own a media company, how they can just plant stories about people. That's what it all is in the NBA. Anytime you see a story where there's a target, someone's putting out that story for some reason. Ben Simmons' stories, the target is often he refuses to evolve his offensive game. Which sort of isn't fair, because it's possible he's just not ever going to be a guy who can shoot. Giannis can't shoot. You know he works on it because he took 3-pointers this season. He made 1.1 threes per ball game. He actually tried a few, and it went horribly, particularly in the playoffs. Ben Simmons won't even try. Is this a man who understands his own limitations, or is this a man that just refuses to acknowledge his own limitations? Either way, there's bad blood now. So handicapping the 76ers going into this season is a screwball effort, because we just don't know if Ben Simmons is going to be there when the season starts. Either because they've already traded him, or because he's in freeze-out mode and won't show up until they do trade him. Sixers reported asking price for Simmons right now is astronomical, which is also quite comical because they're not going to get that from anybody. Every other team in the league just watched what the league did to Ben Simmons come playoff time. That's a tough road to hoe if you're trying to trade a guy and at the same time trying to convince people that he's not what they just saw. His 2 playoff series this year, Philly beat Washington 4-1 in the opening round and lost to Atlanta in the second round. He averaged 15, 10, and 9 in the first round against the Washington Wizards, a team that can't play defense really to save their lives. They tried a little bit harder on the defensive end towards the end of the season, but they still were sub-average. And then Atlanta, who was actually a relatively good defensive team after the Nate McMillan takeover, he averaged 9, 6, and 8.5. That's not superstar level stuff. That's like Lonzo Ball without the three-pointer. You think they're getting what they asked for him if he's Lonzo Ball without the outside shot? Again, not a totally fair comparison, but also not that insane. When you look at how, particularly recently, playoff series have gone for Simmons, when teams began to game plan for him, particularly the series that Philly has lost in each of their last 3 trips to the postseason. Simmons, I don't think, played in the bubble postseason, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was out with an injury for that one. 2019, the Toronto year, when Toronto beat them, he averaged 11, 7, and 5 in that series. Boston, the previous year, when the Celtics beat him 4-1, he averaged 14, 8, and 6. This is not a superstar. This is a good basketball player, but this is not a superstar. So something's going to have to give. Either they're going to have to lower their asking price, which almost unquestionably isn't as high as what they're putting out in the media, because you have to say a bigger thing, and then you try to get teams to bid against themselves, but nobody's that dumb right now, because, again, they all just watched what we watched. So either lower the asking price or you wait until some team gets hyper desperate, which isn't going to happen between now and opening night. That's the type of thing that might happen if a team suffers a giant injury midseason or realizes that they have their own massive personnel issue and you get the Westbrook for John Wall type of swap where it's like, well, neither one of us really wants this guy on our team anymore. They don't fit. Let's just switch them. It's like, oh, Ben Simmons, is there some other team out there who has a 25-year-old who's imploding? We can just switch him, $30 million a year, whatever he's making. Well, at least I can say this. At least we can say this. If Ben Simmons is there, Philly's actually a really easy team to handicap because we saw what they were this last season. Joel Embiid, outstanding, unguardable. Ben Simmons, rounded in a particular way, but saw him a pretty goodly drop-off from last season when he was at 16.5, 8, and 8 with 2.7 defensive stats, 58% from the field and 62 at the free throw line. You move that over to, I guess that would be this season now, this most recent one, and he was at 14, 7, and 7, so the ball got taken out of his hands a little bit in the Doc Rivers give it to Joel Embiid offensive stuff. Also, his defensive stats went down from 2.7 to 2.2. Ben Simmons is a punt free throw guy who no longer is elite enough in any one other offensive category to carry the issue. In fact, he was the 4th best fantasy player on Philadelphia this year on a per-game basis. Who was 3rd? Daniel Green. You guys know I'll always have a soft spot for old Danny Green. Danny Green is signed this coming year for $10 million. So that's on the books, and we'll talk about him in a minute. Tobias Harris is also a really difficult contract to move. They've got him on the books for another $120-ish million or so. So that's going to be kind of a tough one. And then nobody else besides those guys was in the positive fantasy territory, but for a week here, a week there, where a bunch of guys were out. Like we saw, whenever Ben Simmons missed a ball game, Matisse Thybulle slid into his spot and put up 4 or 5 defensive stats for one game. There were stretches this year where Seth Curry was worth using. Very beginning of the year was kind of the winning point for that. And he's a really good fit for that team. He's a floor spacer, outstanding three-point shooter. You can look at his game log from this year, and you can see where COVID hit and when he just sort of... He was playing plenty of minutes, but he wasn't really himself until, like, April. It really, like, legitimately, it seemed like it took him about 2.5 months to get his stroke back. He just didn't get healthy. April. That's when he had a really good December and a really good April. And in between, he was not good. Now, if bodies get moved, things change quite a bit here. But as they currently stand, he doesn't get enough shots to be fantasy relevant because he needs to get a bunch of three-pointers because his value lies in threes and both percentages. So you're not going to be much help if you're not taking shots or free throws or three-pointers if those are the things you're trying to help your team in. Thibault, same kind of thing. You're not drafting him in a standard 12-team league, but if someone on this team gets hurt and he slots in, he's a defensive whiz kid. 2.7 defensive stats for Thibault in 20 minutes a ball game, and it does translate. That goes up to 28, 29 minutes. His defensive stats go right with it, close to 4. It's crazy, actually. He's a rare phenomenon that can kind of keep that per 36 in check. But if we start at the top and assume Ben Simmons is still in Philadelphia, Joel Embiid, 29, 11, and 3 this year, both great percentages. His free throw percent took a massive leap forward, which I don't really know if we can assume that sticks. Career 81%er, a lot of that is because of this year. He was at 80% each of the last 2 seasons before jumping up to 86%. He was hovering in the 48% shooting range the last 3 years in a row before jumping to 51% this year as well. And it's not like we can say that he was magically healthy. It just seems like Doc Rivers gave him the keys to the offense, and it worked for him. I don't see any reason why that changes with or without Ben Simmons. Joel Embiid is a first-round per-game talent who's basically never going to play in more than 80% of his team's games. It's just not going to happen. Missed the first 2 years of his NBA career with a foot injury. His rookie season, 3 years in, he played 31 games, 63, 64 in 82-game seasons. Then each of the last 2 years, 51 out of 72. That's pretty bad. I don't see how you can draft Joel Embiid in almost any kind of league. Luckily, he was so incredible on a per-game basis that year that despite missing 21 of their 72 ball games, he was still number 14 by totals, which put him almost right on his ADP. He was drafted first, usually within the first 4 picks of the second round, so that put him right on the mark. In Roto, he was a win this year because he was number 6 on a per-game basis. You're able to fill out the 21 missed ball games with someone else. He hit his value in 51 games. It's almost like you got 21 freebies out of him if you drafted him in the second round. In head-to-head, I don't know how you end up with a guy like that because he's going to give you zeros and it's going to break you at some point if you're relying on that type of player. Roto... it's going to come down to where he gets drafted. And after that giant year, this most recent season, he's probably going in the first round. I mean, I'd be flabbergasted if he wasn't inside the top 10 or 11 picks this year. And that is a huge, terrifying question mark that's going to hang over your draft slot. Because let's say you have the 11th pick and Embiid is still on the board, and you could pick between... I don't know. Let's come up with an example on the fly here. Let's say that Bradley Beal is still on the board at 11, and Jason Tatum is still on the board at 11. I don't know if I want to go with anybody else. Vooch, you could say, he's in Chicago now, so I don't think I'd go that route. But here's the thing. Tatum was number 8 by totals this last year. I'm talking Roto right now. Let's say this is happening to you and you're in a Roto league. You have pick number 11. You're picking between Embiid, Beal, and Tatum. By totals, Tatum was number 8, Beal was 13, Embiid was 14. On a per-game basis, Embiid was 6, Beal was 14, Tatum was 15, but Tatum played in 64 games, Beal 60, and Embiid 51. If you're in Roto, there's actually a case to be made there that you could go the Joel Embiid route and pray he gets to 64 games played. Because if he only misses 18 games and he racks up top 6, top 7 per game numbers again this coming year, then at the end of the first round, he probably beats his ADP or basically ties it. Me, what would I do? Head-to-head or roto, at that spot, I'm probably going Jason Tatum. I might go Bradley Beal. That's like 60-40. It's pretty damn close to a coin flip. And if you put all three in the bucket, it's like 50, 40, 10% chance I go with Joel Embiid. There's like almost no possibility that I go the Embiid route there in any format. It's just not ever worth it to me to roll the dice like that at pick 11 if you have these other guys on the board. Previous seasons, if you're talking about a guy like Kawhi Leonard, I might have been convinced to go Kawhi because we'd seen he's basically a guaranteed top 5 per game guy. You knew exactly what you were going to get. In Roto, you could survive that because he beats his mark thanks to the per game markers. If Joel Embiid's free throw percent goes back down towards 81, he falls from top 6 to more like top 9. That's what it takes, and he misses his ADP if he again misses 15 or more basketball games. If his free throw percent goes down and he misses 15 games or more, he's not going to be in the first round on a totals basis. You saw it this year. He didn't hit the first round by totals because he missed 21 ball games, and that's despite having, statistically speaking, basically the best season he could have ever possibly had. I just don't see how this, on a per-game basis at least, I don't know how he gets any better. Seems downright impossible. Could blocks go from 1.4 to like 1.6 and everything else stayed exactly the same? I guess. That's damn optimistic. But look, Russ is gone from Washington. Jason Tatum, people didn't like his season for some reason. He was extraordinarily reliable considering all that Boston went through. Top 8 by totals, like that's hard to complain about. But the point I'm trying to make with all of this is the risk is not worth it. As Brew likes to say, to quote, I think it's from the Girl Next Door movie with Alicia Cuthbert, the juice isn't worth the squeeze on Joel Embiid. You're going to be sitting on pins and needles the whole damn year. We've had discussions like this with a guy like Anthony Davis before. Is the juice worth the squeeze to take him in the top 3? The answer there was almost always yes, because if he missed only like 14 games, he was still a top 3 fantasy player, because on a per-game basis, nobody was touching him. Well, now he's got something going on between the ears of the free throw line, and the Lakers are going to be in rest during the regular season mode, and blah, blah, blah. I'm not talking about him right now. I'm talking about Embiid right now, and Joel has yet to play even a number even remotely close to a full complement of basketball games in a year. He's just not even getting, he's not anywhere near it. If you take the chance on Joel Embiid and draft him at 11, and he does somehow play like 68, 69 games this year, he'll beat his ADP. There's no question about it. He'll beat the mark. Like it's not even up for debate. But you can't handicap a player in fantasy and draft them based on the best case scenario. You draft based on an average of all scenarios. And what we've seen from Embiid so far in his NBA career is that he doesn't get that close to a full season. He just doesn't. If you're the maniac that bets on that he does, more power to you. But I'll ask you this follow-up question that I hope you ask yourself anytime you're considering taking a risk in the first 3 rounds. Will this risk win me my league? 999 times out of 1,000, the answer is no. Will it make your team a little better? Yeah. You know, if you get Joel Embiid and instead of playing 61 games this coming year out of 82, he plays like 69, will that make your team better to get 8 more games out of him? Absolutely. Will it win your league that one difference? Will getting Embiid at a best-case scenario 69 games versus, say, Beal at an average scenario of him playing like 74 games out of 82 at a lower per-game clip, will it win your league to have that guy, Embiid, who in that scenario is probably a top 6 fantasy player, versus Tatum, who's like top 12, Does that win your league? No. But what if Embiid misses an extra 5 games over his normal number? What if he plays 56 games out of 82 next year and you spent your first round pick on him? Will that lose you your league? Yeah, probably. If your first round pick misses 35% of his games, 30% of his games, you're going to have a damn hard time getting inside the top 3. The rest of your team better be bleeping perfect. So, all of that to say, I probably won't end up with Joel Embiid on my fantasy teams this coming year. Seems like a long shot based on his injury history and my tack on how we approach the first couple rounds of a fantasy draft, which is you need those guys logging games, not getting you zeros. Not surprisingly, for those that follow the Dan Besbris Old Man Squad, the second-ranked player on Philadelphia this year was Tobias Harris, and it honestly wasn't very close. Tobias was number 28 on a per-game basis. He was as non-durable as he's ever been in his NBA career. He missed 10 games. I know. It was crazy. And he finished number 22 by totals because most players in the NBA actually missed more than 10 games. It was more like 11 to 11 and a half for the average top 150 fantasy player. Or I should say, the top 150 fantasy players' average number of games missed was actually slightly higher than 10. Tobias averaged 20 points, 7 boards, 3.5 assists, a steal, a little less than a block. Great percentages, 1.3 3-pointers. Also someone who thrives under Doc Rivers. Doubt he's going anywhere. You can pen him in, etch him in stone. That Tobias Harris is going to have another productive year, and damn it, he might even be more durable this coming season. There is a very real chance that Tobias Harris gets drafted in the 40s or 50s again and performs in the teens or 20s again. I got to get out of these damn leagues with all of you. This is the player that always reminds me of this. I need to get out of roto leagues that you guys all join that I created. It's killing me. It's like you guys are taking a handful of thumbtacks and just ramming them into my face on draft night when I'm sitting there, because every other league that I've ever played, I've been able to let Tobias Harris fall right into my lap at like pick 55 or 60. And with all of you turds joining my league, you guys all draft him at 41, and I can't get him. I didn't have Tobias Harris anywhere last year. This is the guy that on the podcast I've said, this is the one I'm targeting in all of my leagues. Tobias Harris. Easy money. Easy money. I think Vooch was the other one of those. Easy money, I said. And you jerks took him before I could get him. So to that end, by the way, I'll bring this back up probably next month. If you're in a league where you're the one person who listens to hoopball stuff and everybody else doesn't, I will happily join your league. It's exhausting, man. I like beating you guys because I did this last year. I did quite well in my roto leagues and largely are filled with you dudes and gals. And yet, I'm tired. It's too hard. People say it's really satisfying to win when you have to work really hard to get it. I want a couple of easy ones. And Tobias is supposed to be mine. Anyway, he's an easy win. Again, he'll be an easy win again until the end of time because his value is tied up in percentages and nobody pays attention to that crap. Nobody pays attention to it. No one cares. He's like league average in steals, blocks, rebounds, a hair better. Like he's a hair better than league average in a couple of categories, but he's like it's the strangest damn thing. Remember how on this show we talk about how if you're league average in everything, you're basically a top 75 fantasy player? Tobias Harris is like league average in threes, assists, steals, and turnovers, and he's slightly better than league average in scoring, rebounding, blocks, field goal percent, and free throw percent. 5 of the 9 categories. He's ever so slightly better than league average. And the other 4, he's almost exactly league average. And that's enough to jump a guy from top 75 to inside the top 30 on a per-game basis. And then he's durable. He's a great head-to-head player because he doesn't miss games. He's a great roto player because he's drafted so damn late. What else needs to be said? I'm jumping over Danny Green. I'll come back to him in just a second. We got to talk about Ben Simmons from a fantasy perspective. Here's the thing. His role isn't getting better in Philadelphia. He's on the outs there right now, which, of course, also means he might end up being a slight value this year, but I just don't know. It probably not for one main reason. And that main reason is because, and we've also talked about this in the past, the main reason he won't be a value ever on draft day is because 8-cat and points category leagues get rolled together with 9-category leagues, the ones that we generally study on this podcast, into what creates a big box site's pre-rank board or their ADPs, whichever one you want to look at. Either way, it's all getting rolled together. ESPN ranks are built heavily on a points league engine. Yahoo ranks are built heavily on a combination of 8 and 9 category leagues. So a guy like Simmons, who's bad at turnovers, he's going to get drafted earlier because if they're in a 9-cat league, 8-cat numbers are going to get rolled in. If there are points leagues that get factored in any way because his free throw percent is so god-awful, that's going to pull his value up the board because there are leagues where people don't care about that. And people punt it. It's, by the way, again, why it's so easy to win the percentages categories in a 9-category, particularly Roto League, because ADPs of players like Ben Simmons are clouded by punting 8-cat and points leagues. Those guys are always going to get drafted too soon because of those extenuating circumstances. No, it doesn't even have to be that much. If only 10% of Yahoo's leagues are points leagues, that's still 10% where Ben Simmons is going inside the top 20 when he should be going at like 75. Just pull up that number. Do some very quick math and say, okay, 9 times, and let's forget about turnovers for a minute. Let's say it's only 9-cat and points leagues. 9 times he's drafted at 70. Let's just say 7 to simplify here. 9 times he's drafted at 7, and 1 time he's drafted at 2. What's the weighted average there? Well, 9 times 7 is 63, plus 2 is 65, divided by 10, 6.5. And so every time that happens, it pulls his ADP earlier. If there's some 8-cat leagues where he gets drafted inside the top 40 because he had 3 turnovers a game and that was one of his negative categories last year. Okay, all of a sudden now, let's say 7, and this is actually way too high. So let's say 6 times he's drafted at 70. That's 9-category leagues. 3 times he's drafted at 40, and a points league, 1 time he's drafted at 20. You can do weighted averages again. 6 times 7 is 42, plus 3 times 4, 12, goes to 54, plus 1, 55. Now all of a sudden his ADP is 55, even though we know he should be going at 70. So all it takes is those little things where it ensures that he will never fall far enough for those of us who play 9-category roto formats and aren't punting. I mean, we didn't even factor in the punt guys who are going to take him at 20 also. I think you guys get the mathematical picture there. They don't call me pedantic for nothing. So Ben Simmons, you're not going to end up on my fantasy team unless I'm punting free throws. Kick him out. Finally, Danny Green, who somehow managed to have a top 55 season by totals and top 86 on a per-game basis. And I will say, a lot of that is because guys missed games around him. Seth Curry missed 25 games. No, I'm sorry. Seth Curry missed 15 games. Apologies, folks. But he wasn't himself for long stretches of other ones. Furkan Korkmaz missed 17 games. Embiid 21. Simmons 14. Tobias 10. When those guys were out, you had these big Danny Green explosion games. They were super weird because no one saw them coming. But it was just like, oh, Danny, go nuts. You can find him. Go to his game log and look for the weird game where he took, like in January, he took 17 shots on January 9th and 25 shots on January 12th. He had 29, 10, and 6 in that ball game. 2 steals and 2 blocks. Like, who the hell? What? But, I think Tobias Harris was out for that ball game. It was really weird. Ben Simmons was in, but he only took 2 shots, so he went all Ben Simmons on it. Embiid took 23. Tyrese Maxey took 18. Mike Scott took 16. So there's no Seth Curry, and there was no Tobias Harris in that ball game. It's very clear what it always is going to take to get Danny Green to some sort of weird fantasy threshold. In early March, he had a stretch where he took 15 shots, then 13, 8, 9, 14. That was weird. But those games pop up for him, and it's why Danny Green has, throughout his entire career, been the ultimate don't pay attention to the night-to-night thing going on. He's pretty durable, so that's good news. 69 out of 72 games this year, 68 out of 72 last year with the Lakers, 80 out of 82 games with Toronto the previous season. Then you go back to Spurs days where he got yanked around by Greg Popovich a little bit. But basically, since he's been out from under Pop, he's played within 4 games of a full season. So Danny Green, excellent head-to-head guy. If you're actually contemplating winning turnovers, if you're bunting turnovers, then yeah, a lot of his value gets wiped out in the wash there. But excellent head-to-head guy because of the durability. With Roto, limited upside. I mean, this year he was a solid Roto value play. In 28 minutes per ball game, it was the highest number he's played in a game since 2014. That was back in his 1-1-1 year with San Antonio. It was the year where we were like, holy crap, Danny Green, he's like a top 50 guy all of a sudden. And yeah, that disappeared pretty quickly. But 1.3 steals this year, 0.8 blocks. He really did look like himself. 8 shots per ball game, 6.5 of them from downtown. Doesn't take free throws, so sort of doesn't really matter there. Pretty repeatable stats for him, and I think the only way that he gets cluttered is if Ben Simmons goes out and they bring in a high-level, I guess it would be like a 2-guard, although it's not entirely clear what position any of these guys is playing on the Sixers. They're just a gigantic basketball team. But they love his defense. He's sort of a championship type of guy. And I mean, I'd be floored if he gets drafted inside the top 120. In head-to-head, he's a great grab at that range. At Roto, it's not exciting. And you kind of have to be looking for particular stuff. You need to be threes, defensive stats, and low turnovers hunting at that point in Roto, which, I don't know. Like, Danny Green has no chance of being inside the top 75. And we keep talking about how your draft picks near the top 100 have to be guys where you're like, look, on a per-game basis, could this guy hit the top 70, 75 range? With Danny Green, the answer is no. This year at number 86 was probably a best-case scenario. Again, the way he gets better is if Ben Simmons is just sitting out games at the beginning of the year. Because Ben did take 10 shots a ball game for all the warts and whatever. He took 10 shots a night, so you just remove that from the equation, and probably a half a shot or 1 shot goes to Danny Green. And you give him an extra shot, outstanding. His threes go up, his scoring goes up. That's good. But they like him on the floor. He's going to play big minutes. And he'll be a decent head-to-head grab. So give me Tobias Harris in any format. Give me Danny Green, probably more so in head-to-head than Roto because of the slightly capped upside. Ben Simmons, you will go too soon. Embiid, you will probably go around the right time, assuming he plays kind of the way his averages suggest he'll play in terms of both per game and missed games numbers. But that also makes him someone I'm not going to venture into early in drafts, which is where he's going. Seth Curry, potentially worth a grab in the very last round of like a 15-round draft, because if he gets it going like he did at the beginning and end of this last season, his percentages were able to carry him. And he's a guy like in that Joe Harris mold that can get you threes without hurting you in the percentages. Those are hard to find because, again, I like to build fantasy teams that win field goal and free throw percent. So that's actually really helpful. Keeps you in the mix in three-pointers, which is often something that suffers when you're targeting defensive stats, field goal, and free throw percent. That is a category that's hard to balance. So Seth Curry, last round flyer, Thibault waiver wire guy, Simmons, Embiid, doubt it, Tobias, yes, Danny Green head-to-head. That's your Philadelphia 76ers. Back at you tomorrow. We'll do the Boston Celtics on Thursday. We'll wrap things up in the Atlantic Division with the Raptors over the weekend. And then next week, we're going to talk to our good friend, our old buddy, Josh Millman. Find out how things are going on the Josh front. Talk free agency, some of the spots he's looking for value. That should be coming up early next week. And then we'll start a little bit of draft prep stuff. We'll do a little draft 101, get into some mocks after that. And the count up, forget countdown, the count up begins towards the start of this next fantasy season. I am Dan Vespers. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a hoop ball presentation. I'll promo your ears off tomorrow. Today, you get a break, and use it wisely. So long.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.